What is up, everybody? Welcome to Destination the Show, episode 59. It is Monday, November 25th, 2024. My name is Jamie Cameron, joined as always by Jeremy Nygaard. Jeremy, I was hoping to introduce you as state champ Jeremy Nygaard, but alas, the football gods had other plans for you last week, it
Yeah,
sounds like.
my wife is in the background giving this thing going on. So, yeah, the Blackhawks picked the wrong game to start off and play the worst half of the year.
That is such a bummer.
Um, Turned the ball over twice in the first half and fumbled the opening kickoff of the second half. It was 20-0. 50, I think, like 54 seconds into the third quarter, and then we went touchdown, forced I think it was a 3-and-out touchdown, got the ball back, touchdown, forced another one. So it was
Was that 23-20 at that point? Something like
no,
that?
I must have missed it. Anyway, it was 26-22. We get the ball back with 4 minutes left,
Oh my God.
and we drive down the field and face fourth down at our own like 17-yard line, 4th and 7. And the quarterback was pressured and actually miraculously got off a throw as he was being like pulled down backwards and threw it into two of our guys and two of the opposition, and one of their guys came down with it. So it was a bittersweet end of the other team took one kneel. We didn't have any timeouts left, and the season was over. But it was one of those games. It was a drizzly night. We turned the ball over 7 times all year. We turned the ball over 4 times
Oh man.
Thursday night. So it was a bummer. But I mean, I would have never believed that we would have been state runners up if you'd have told me that at the beginning of the year. But it was a fun ride. I mean, like just some of the records that were set for the school. It was like all the rushing stuff. Our two highest. I don't know if I mentioned it last week. Our two highest single season rushing totals this year. Both quarterback and running back were all state and had close to 30 touchdowns rushing each. I mean, it was insane. So it was a fun run, but like you said, it wasn't in the cards.
Dude, so I gotta tell you that this past week was maybe the first time I've ever felt sorry for you in my life. I think usually, like, I take great delight in your misery. But last Thursday, this is the last text you sent me.
I'm sad.
11:21. I'm sad, tired, and hungry.
I was all of those things.
Oh, I felt
Oh,
bad, dude. I'm sorry. That's a tough way to end the season, but
yeah.
hey, hell of a run.
And then we got Topper's Pizza, and I didn't think it was very good.
It's not. It's
So that
not.
was better.
Um, Rough day for you, but here we are back at it. I'm
Yeah.
excited, dude, to dig into more baseball, chat with you. We're going to talk high level about some offseason needs for the teams that we cover the most. Do want to cover some general news and notes before we dig into all of that, starting with a couple of random topics. One, I'm kind of bummed that we didn't discuss last week because it was on my list and it did not get in the running order. And I think that I've spent enough time with you now that I know how you're going to feel about this. So here's my question. Does the idea of Griffin Jacks moving to the Twins rotation do anything for you? And what is your rationale either way?
Uh, I I think just as the idea, I like when teams consider things outside the box.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but you don't move a guy into the bullpen until you think he can't do it as a starter. And at this point, a high leverage reliever is someone that you have to use in every game that you're ahead, right? And so the more high leverage relievers that you have, the better. Moving him to the rotation takes a high leverage reliever away, and there's no guarantee that he's going to be even a serviceable starter, right? I mean, the
Mm-hmm.
assumption would be that he is. Um, and so I do. I mean, I like toying with the idea. I just think at this point in time in his career, it doesn't really make sense to do. Because if you're thinking about that with Griffin Jacks, why not think about it with Duran, right? And there's a reason that those guys are relief pitchers. And if you have those two right in the 8th and 9th inning, and you can get a lead to the 6th, like there's a really good chance you're going to win. I'm not a fan of spending money on bullpen guys, but I do think when you have those types of guys for relatively cheap in positions, just keep them there or trade them, because the value that you can bring back in a trade makes more sense than hoping the success of being a starter, which maybe it would work and maybe he'll be great and that's awesome. But I'm not for it personally.
You don't, so like guys having gone through that transformation relatively recently doesn't move you, like a Garrett Crochet. Like it's hard to argue with some of the results some teams have started to get from big arms turned starting pitchers. So I'm curious whether
there has been,
a
right?
recent track record like moves the needle for you at all.
Like there's a ton of those dudes.
Mhm.
But I think for everybody that is like that, you can probably find an example of the opposite.
Sure.
And you can find an example of a guy that was supposed to be a good relief pitcher who just totally was horrible, right? And so that's the thing with pitchers in general. Like you got it, and then all of a sudden you don't. And so maybe if you're like, we don't know how long he's going to have it, but if he could do it every 5 days as a starter, it's just great. Griffin Jacks gets us to the 6th inning with a lead, and now you turn it over to
Not Griffin Jacks.
and then what? And then you
well, I suppose, Jeremy, then you have to rely on the processes that got Griffin Jacks to the point where he's one of the best relievers in Major League Baseball. Because when he first was a relief pitcher for the Twins, he sure wasn't as good as he is now. Right? Cole Sands, I feel like, is another example of a guy who's hopefully in the midst of a similar transformation where if we go back to the 2023 season, he's like an up and down guy. Like, does he have a role? And then last year, he's now firmly established as someone who's part of the core of the bullpen, right? And so does he take another half step forwards this year and become more dominant? Is there another guy? I suppose that's the bet that you're making in that case, is that your internal guys like Jax, who developed from just a bullpen guy to a dominant bullpen guy, that you can replicate that process with someone else.
So what's his, like, does he have, in your opinion, a pitch mix that works as a starter?
I think he has a pitch mix that works as a starter, stuff that works as a starter, velocity that works as a starter, and command that works as a starter. And I think that's the reason that they're considering it, right? I think that Jax has really learned to pitch in an elite fashion, in addition to upping the nastiness of his stuff since he's become a high leverage bullpen guy. The question, of course, is your stuff isn't going to play to quite the same level when you're going through the order the second time or the third time. And so I think the unknowable here, unless you're the Twins or the Driveline folks that he's worked with, is what does his stuff look like after 65, 70, 80, 85 pitches? And does the command hold up? Can he hold the velocity enough? Those are the questions that I'm interested in, but I certainly think pitch mix, stuff, velo, command, the pieces are in place for that to at least be an interesting conversation internally for the Twins, and one I'm sure they're having.
If you had to put a percentage on this going into spring training, what percentage would you put on it? That he is in spring training used at least to start spring training as a starter.
Well, I'm just going to ignore all other variables here, like hypothetical injuries and stuff. I'm going to say 40-60.
Okay.
I'm going to say 60 against, 44. I do think it's has enough media noise that it sounds like it's something they're at least considering. I would also say, on the other hand, the reason I would be 60 against is like, you do have depth, right? You've got Pablo, Bailey Ober, Joe Ryan, who am I forgetting? Simeon Woods Richardson, David Festa, Zebby Matthews. Now, I think a couple of those guys you're hoping to start at AAA, probably Zebby. Chris Paddock, I don't foresee being long for this organization.
See, and I think Paddock makes more sense as a reliever.
Agreed, 100%. In fact, you could swap those guys. Why not? I'm not saying Paddock is as effective as Griffin Jacks, but just purely as a one-for-one guy. And if you look at the folks that the Twins tendered contracts to, they're basically returning their entire bullpen from last year, right? They even tendered a contract to Michael Tonkin, who's
shockingly.
I don't know that it is, though, because what is his contract? Theo will tell us, I'm sure, in the chat. It's like a little over $1 million. And
right.
Tonkin has a valuable asset that no one else in the Twins bullpen has, which is he can pitch every day, pretty much. He's a rubber-armed guy they haven't had since Emilio Pagan, who you don't need to use in high leverage, but you can use for an inning 2 out of 3 days. 1.3 million, says Theo. So what? That's $500,000 over the league minimum. That's what think about it, and think about it through this frame then, Jeremy. How much did they pay Jay Jackson last year? About the same, 1.1, a little over $1 million, I want to say. And he did absolutely nothing in terms of meaningful major league contribution. I feel like that's a worthwhile gambit for the Twins.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just a little surprised to see that myself.
A little bit. I agree a little bit. But I think, there are some interesting variables in the Twins bullpen this year. You've got Stewart back. Is he going to be healthy? You've got Justin Topa back. Did not contribute to the Twins last year. Could be really useful. I do think their bullpen's in a decent spot, but we'll get into that. Okay. Angels are the only major league team doing anything, which is funny because I feel like the offseason is always slow, but they're really the only team who've kind of gotten up and running. They signed Yusei Kikuchi this morning, Jeremy. 3 years, $63 million. Did you miss this?
Didn't even see that.
Oh, well, here's your breaking news. The Angels inked Kikuchi this morning, 3 years, $63 million. Does that do anything for you? Does that excite? Does the Angels' early aggressiveness excite you?
Well, the names that I've seen come through don't really. I'm like, what are we doing? Like, why is that the first move? So Kikuchi went traded from Toronto, right? And the Astros super overpaid for him.
Well, I don't think that was really an overpay. I think it's just a bunch of names that were well known in the upper minors that aren't actually going to be impactful major leaguers. But yes, people were outraged by that at the time.
And he pitched pretty well for.
He pitched great because they tweaked his pitch mix, I want to say, and he threw less curveballs and more sliders, and also had a great BABIP. And I think maybe a little bit of that was a little bit lucky, but we'll see.
So I mean, on the list of starting pitchers, like where in the pecking order was he?
So I want to say like he's kind of like tier 2, right? Behind you've got Max Fried and Corbin Burns, the top guys, and then you've got your tier 2 guys of which he's probably one. My thing is always just going to be, do you trust the Angels to maximize anyone's pitch mix stuff, strengths in general in any facet of the game? I don't.
No.
They have no established track record of. I'm sorry. They have no established track record in the last 5 years of doing anything useful in a systematic way. 10, 15 in a systematic way with prospects, with guys coming to their org. And so I feel like we're going to get the Blue Jays version more so than the Astros version.
I completely missed this news. So I open Twitter once a day now, and it's way behind. So I'm just yeah, screw it.
Sure.
So was the reaction on the social media oh, now Scott Boras is going to actually have his guy signed before spring training? Because he's a Boras guy.
Oh, is he? I don't know. I didn't see much in relation to Boras, just a bunch of mixed takes of the Angels signed him, so it's going to be bad. And then, the other side of that as well, at least they're trying and they're raising their floor and blah, blah, blah. So,
and $21 million a year for 3 years for a mid-rotation guy, that's not crazy money.
So Gleeman put up an interesting post, which I think says more about Pablo than Kikuchi. And I agree with you. It's fine value. Although I think Kikuchi's 34. He's going to be 37 by the end of that deal. But
about 33.5 right
30.
now.
Okay. But that's basically akin. What they're giving him is basically the Pablo Lopez extension, right? That's what the Angels are. That's what's left on Pablo's deal with the Twins. And so if you stack those up side by side,
It doesn't look
and
great.
I know which one I
But
would like more.
but the going rate for pitchers goes up every
For sure.
offseason.
For sure. Okay, and then
What else? Tell me what else the Angels have done. They signed a catcher, right?
What else have they done? They signed. See, now you're gonna put me on the spot, and I don't have my list prepared. They also signed.
Was it like
Theo's gonna put the list in the chat for us. Travis
no,
Darno is the catcher.
okay, I saw that one.
They picked up they picked up a slugger too. I want to say from the from the
Did
Braves.
Soler? It was Jorge Soler in the news.
Jorge Soler. There you go.
Was he the one that signed? Okay. They traded for the Braves. And then Kyle Farmer signed
for the Rockies.
He's going to hit 100 home runs next year and win a batting title. I feel like every Twin that ever goes to Colorado, Justin Morneau, Micah Kadire, win a batting title. So does that mean Kyle Farmer?
I do not believe it means
well,
Kyle Farmer. The Rockies are a strange organization. Okay, here's the last thing I want to do before we jump into these off-season things, because I asked this last week, and we got lots of interesting responses. Remember how we talked about target field and why do the Twins struggle to fill it?
Yes.
I crowdsourced this question on Blue Sky, the much more friendly and clean and polite social media. And I got a lot of responses. So I'm going to read a couple to you, and you can tell me whether any of these like resonate with you as reasons that the Twins struggle to fill target field. So here's the question. Why do the Twins struggle to fill target field even when they're good? And I put in my post, I think about the Brewers as a similar market team who always pack their ballpark when they're playing well. Here's some thoughts folks have. This Tom Froming.
Okay.
Good isn't good enough anymore. A big chunk of the casuals want better than good before they reinvest. A lot better. It also seems fashionable to dunk on the Twins rather than to support them. At least that's the vibe I get from more general sports fans versus baseball-specific fans. Perry, also on Blue Sky, Twins season ticket holder the last 2 years, lived in New York 03 to 22. My guess here is that folks' entertainment dollar is going elsewhere, especially when the Wolves, Lynx, MNUFC are all good. Not spending on the team hurts too. Jeremy, not you, different Jeremy. I think there is a lack of belief inherent in Minnesota sports fans. We've been burned by the successful teams before, so we don't spend our time, dollars, and energy on a team that may not be legit, quote unquote. The difference in attendance and vibe between the playoff games in 2023 and the end of 2024 helps show that point. A lot of people talking about a playoff losing streak to the Yankees contributing to this. Here's another couple. Kirby Hawk 34. I live 5 hours away, but come through on my way up north every summer. I'm not spending my money on the Twins anymore if the owners aren't interested in spending theirs. Pretty simple. Last one from Kathy. We used to be partial season ticket holders. It's too expensive to go to games now, and team leadership seems more concerned with new overpriced concessions than the actual team. We go to one game per year now. Jeremy, I feel like you are much more of a legit authority on in-person sports than I am because you're always at them. Any of those reasons or rationales resonate with you from what you heard from folks?
Yeah, I think they're all probably factors. The attending a Twins game has gotten way more expensive. Parking around, and it's the same for Wolves. I mean, you're spending $20 if you want to park somewhere relatively secure, and if you don't, you might get your stuff broken into. And so you're spending on parking. They recently, is it Delaware Food or whatever? They used to include the tax in the listed price. And so if you were paying $5.99 for a water, you were paying $5.99 for water. and now it's $5.99 plus tax.
Interesting.
And so I mean, prices went up whatever 7% just because of that, and the prices went up in addition to that. And so you go to Gate 34 and buy a beer. I mean, you could be spending $18 or $19 on just a 16-ounce glass of beer, which people are obviously doing, right? But I think there might be a lot of casual fans that just are like, screw that. I'll watch it from my high definition TV or not, right? So that's the other factor. If it's harder to watch the team, which it has been the last handful of years,
This is true.
it's now harder to invest in that team, and it's kind of like out of sight, out of mind. I can't watch them on TV. My fandom is dialing back. Now I don't even bother going to the game. And so I feel like that there's a lot of those combinations of things too. I feel like over the last couple of years, I've went to less games just because, I mean, there's a number of factors, but it's like, yeah, I could go spend $150 or just not go, right?
Yep.
And so I think every point that was made there is probably points to the fact that there's just a lot of reasons why. But yeah, you compared to Milwaukee, what else has happened in Milwaukee?
Bucks playing bad.
Well, they're playing better now, but the overlap of those seasons are.
This is true.
There's nothing. I mean, that's kind of like one of the things that we put on the list. Like, can we do a doubleheader regular season Twins game, regular season Wolves game?
Mm-hmm.
And like, they don't overlap. It'd have to be playoffs of one.
Yep.
And so I do think that there's, and the amount of stuff that's downtown in Minneapolis, it's like there's so much stuff to do. So yeah, the solution is going to be that the Twins just have to get a lot better and win, and then people will start showing up again, because they were showing up when they were winning 2 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and they quickly stopped showing up when they weren't winning last year.
Oh yeah. I like that. I like that crowdsource question,
Yep.
Jeremy. You know what? We'll do another one at the end of this episode, and we'll put a call out for some answers, and then I'll blue sky. I don't know what the blue sky equivalent of tweet as a verb is. But we'll put it out there for people before our next episode. We got tons of great responses, so thanks for folks who answered that call. All right, let's run through some high level off-season needs. Basically, I want to get your takes, Jeremy, on like do these feel like the right things to you, and then pitch you a couple of like free agent names for each team, and then also more kind of globally, does it feel like this team is better suited to fill their needs via free agency or via trade? Because that is, I think, going to be an interesting decision point for each of the teams that we talk about a lot this summer. So let's start with the Brewers. The Brewers have some things to do. Priority number one, replace Willy Adames. And I'm going to just make the assumption here that they're not going to re-sign him. He is not coming back to Milwaukee on any kind of hometown discount. Defensively, that's not a problem because you have Joey Ortiz, who is outstanding. The Brewers have an outstanding defensive infield, period. But offensively, that is a major issue. You also need starting pitching. You've got Frankie Montas departing, Colin Reed departing. You are just losing a bunch of innings from the back end of your rotation. Hopefully, you're getting Brandon Woodruff back at some point during the season. So I guess my first question for you is, what do you think the Brewers' best plan of attack is in terms of filling some of their holes? Are you dipping into that very deep farm system in order to address some of their needs? Because I think it's fair to say that they're maybe one of the surprise teams in Major League Baseball last year with how they dominated the NL Central pretty much from start to finish.
Yeah, I think it's probably a willingness, right? And how willing have they been over the last handful of years to deal prospects? I mean, it's been a while, and so I think it's probably something that they'll have to really consider, because they've done such an excellent job drafting that they do have that ability to do so. But I think they're going to target it's the way it always feels with the Brewers. They target a very specific type, and then they
Mm-hmm.
go get that type, and it fits really well in their plans. And so I'm guessing they're going to find some good free agent bargains that are going to fit really well in their plans, and not have to go into the organizational well. But I think that they probably would have a willingness to do so, just because they have that depth, and their core now with Jackson Churio being, the real deal.
The
Their
real deal.
core is getting, their core is younger than it was 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
You add a 19-year-old as your centerpiece, and that gives you a little bit of flexibility to do other things, especially one that's signed to a sweet deal. And so I think there'll be a willingness. They have a lot of corner type players,
Yep.
and they're going to bring pitchers up that just do okay and get them there. So I would be kind of surprised if they dealt a lot of prospects, but it wouldn't shock me if they kind of dealt, from the periphery of their top 15.
Yep.
To get guys that make sense. They've pulled off some real good deals, like getting Contreras, where
Mm-hmm.
they didn't necessarily give up much at all. So I do think that they're not, adverse to making a trade, but I think it's going to be a trade that is going to make a lot of sense for that organization.
Yep. For sure, that makes sense to me. A couple of points to kind of back up what you said there. One pickup they've already made, bringing in former Yankees top prospect Davy Garcia. Can see
Oh,
him.
I
Can
like
see.
that.
Yeah. Can see. Can't you just see him going through the Brewers lab and coming out as a really useful pitcher for them? And then I'm making the assumption, Jeremy, that they are putting Joey Ortiz as their full-time shortstop, which is
Okay.
then going to open a vacancy at third base. How do you like the thought of Yoan Moncada as a third base Brewers cheap reclamation project to fill that hole?
Yeah, I mean that's a name that I think makes sense in a lot of places, because he came in with all the fanfare, teased, and then was hurt, just kind of freakishly hurt, and then hasn't been great. I think he'll continue to get opportunities, and so that would make a lot of sense from the Brewers' perspective. But I do think that there'll be plenty of teams that are looking for that type of player. Um, he'll turn 30 in May, and I do think that he makes sense. So whether the Brewers or somebody else, I think that's a guy that there'll be a lot of suitors for, despite the fact he hasn't been real good lately.
Yep. 1 year make good deal type of a thing. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the Cubs. The first thing I want to ask you about is this before we talk about their needs. The hottest rumor, and this is just for fun, right? Because we know that we have to pace ourselves during the long and slow off season. The hottest early winter rumor is that the Cubs are aggressively shopping Cody Bellinger, who opted into a $27.5 million player option, has another player option after the season for $25 million. Do you think that's legit? Do you think they will have any joy in moving Bellinger? What are your thoughts on that whole
I mean,
storyline?
you got to find the partner, right? And then you got to match the value. And I would think there would be a market if they're willing to eat a bunch of money and not want to take a whole bunch of stuff back. But at this point, I mean, how are you gonna eat money? Like, I can imagine that that's something that the Cubs are real eager to do. I mean, he's so weird, because it's like you look at his years and it's like 2017, unbelievable. 2018,
So
not as
weird.
great. 2019, unreal.
Mm-hmm.
2020, not great, but pretty good still. 2021, unbelievably bad.
Yep.
2022, still really bad, and then bounce back in 2023. And 2024 was a below average year, but I feel like there's still something there. But am I willing to spend to sign him to the contract that he has? I don't know that I want him at that. So I mean, now you're
Absolutely
looking
not.
at a negative value contract.
No way.
I think the Cubs, I mean, they could aggressively shop him, and teams are like, yeah, you want to throw in one of your stud prospects and pay the money, or however that you balance that out. I don't see that being something that works unless you're dealing with an organization that's just really eager to get their hands on him. Like I could see the Royals as a Cody Bellinger type team, just because the Royals would make a splashy deal like that, right?
Yeah.
We put on the Royals, but I don't see him going anywhere. Obviously, I could be wrong, but that to me would just be a weird move to make.
Dude, sorry, I'm smirking. I just when you mentioned the Royals, I also saw a article mentioning them this week that they are interested in Juan Soto, and it just made me laugh because I too am interested in Juan Soto.
Yeah, exactly. Like Cody Bellinger would be much more gettable for the Kansas City Royals.
Yep. Okay, so the Cubs offseason needs I find really interesting, and we're going to refer to their transaction log a little bit to try and highlight some of these, right? So I listed a couple of things, right? One is pitching. The second thing I listed as like star quality question mark, because there's just room for impact players on this team. They have severely disappointed the last 2 seasons. A lot of their initial moves this offseason seem to have been upgrading around the margins. So they traded for Matt Thaiss, catcher from the Angels. They traded for Eli Morgan from the Guardians, gave up Alfonso Rosario, a slugging prospect in the lower minors, to get him. They also have DFA'd like a who's who of old famous prospects to get space on their roster. So Brendan Davis, Nick Madrigal, Patrick Wisdom, Edbert Alzolay, Mike Tauchman, all no longer with the organization. I like their initial moves, right? Getting a solid bullpen piece. They had significant challenges at the catcher spot last year. I think that's fine as long as they keep going. My worry with the Cubs is that they don't keep going and Jed Hoyer just settles for kind of the bare minimum. So what do you make of the the Cubs move so far? It does seem like a lot of the media speculation is they are going to be out on one of the top arms like Corbin Burns or Max Fried. So perhaps it's more likely, Jeremy, that the Cubs also deal from their incredibly deep farm system. And, they're one of a handful of teams with one of the better systems in the entire league. But they sure could use some high quality innings. And so I wonder if they'd be willing to deal from it to get them.
Well, and they have guys that are closer too, right? Like Horton is closer. Owen Casey's closer. Matt Shaw is somewhere closer. So I could see them just trying to sign like some solid stopgap types. Like you said, they're not in the big names. So if you can find like a bridge type player, bridge type pitcher, where it's like solid depth for your rotation, that if we need them for a year, like the Chris Paddock move was for the Twins. You weren't necessarily getting a number 3 starter, but you were getting someone that was a serviceable starter with question marks. And Paddock was great, or would have been a great bridge had. I'm gonna have some dogs that start fighting here.
You're fine.
A serviceable type starter that will bridge the gap to Cade Horton. And so it's interesting because we talk about the Twins and the Brewers, small markets teams, but then you have the Cubs, who should not operate like a small market team.
Right.
We do.
Yeah, I'm so interested to see what the Cubs do this year. I mean, the depth they have like you say, in the upper minors at this point, not all of those guys are going to turn into dudes at the major league level. And I feel a little bit this way. And I feel a little bit similar when it comes to the Twins and some of their upper minors pitching prospects, right? Which is when you get guys to the upper levels of the minors, there's going to come a year when some of those guys show you that they are not going to be dudes at the major league level, and you want to trade those guys before you get to that point. And that's what's making me wonder whether the Cubs are potentially lining up a bigger move this offseason. I do think it makes sense for them, and I think they would be smart to part with some of their dudes from the crop that's like Kevin Alcantara, not necessarily Owen Casey, but like that caliber of prospect in the upper minors. Trade some of those guys for legitimate MLB contribution immediately.
It's like they did last year, right? I mean, they made a fun trade with the Dodgers and got their everyday first baseman out of the deal.
And the Dodgers got maybe a top 10 future prospect in baseball in Zaire Hope. We'll talk about that another day.
Superstar.
Okay, so last but not least, we'll go high level on the Twins. Here's what I got for needs in no particular order, and you can tell me whether you agree or disagree. First baseman, Carlos Santana is departing. Was signed to a 1-year deal. Was great. Won a Gold Glove. All the things. The Twins bullpen we already touched on today. Generally all set. Absolutely in need of a left-handed reliever. Some right-handed hitting outfield. A right-handed hitting outfield bat. Ideally, someone who could play a solid center field defense for Byron Buxton. And then I also added starting pitching depth because that always seems like something the Twins are looking for, something they tried to add last season unsuccessfully in the Jorge Polanco trade when they got, what's the pitcher's name from the Mariners who did not throw a single pitch for the Twins?
DeSclafani.
Thank you. So, Jeremy, agree with that list? Anything you would add? Anything in particular that you're like, this is the number one need? Because we know the Twins are struggling for financial flexibility in the midst of a potential ownership change. All of those factors in play. What sticks out as the highest priority for you?
I think it's got to be outfield, right? I mean, that to me is like first baseman. They'll plug someone in first base. I really liked having Carlos Santana. He exceeded expectations, but I feel like that's kind of just a spot that they put guys when they need them. The bullpen is always, who knows what they're going to do with the bullpen. They're going to try to sign some guys off the scrap heap. It's going to not turn out well. Then they're going to claim guys off waivers and give them, a few innings and then DFA them and do it again. But I do think that outfield with losing Kepler and who knows with Buxton, Margot's gone. Mm-hmm. So really what do you have? You have Buxton in center. You have Larnach. And even him is that really the way you want to go? Like, I think there's a spot on a major league team for Trevor Larnach. I'm not sure it's as a regular on a really good team.
Yeah.
And so I feel like you have two starters locked in, and if you want to platoon Larnach, sure. But there's just and then what's the depth behind it? Like is Willie Castro figuring into this equation? There's and that's the hard part. Like, where does Castro fit in? He's a great utility guy. Yep. Where does Julian fit in? Is it somewhere? You have Brooks Lee, who wasn't great, but obviously fits into the future. Jose Miranda, who knows? Royce Lewis is awesome, but was bad. Like there's just all these question marks that make it really hard. Like, I don't even know what the first domino is that has to fall. I just don't think there's a starter in the outfield. There's a spot spoken for in the outfield. If it's Trevor Larnach, that's just not good enough.
I agree, and I think the outfield depth in general is pretty poor. I think Deshaun Kersey would be a great defensive backup for Buxton. I don't think we have enough of a established track record of him hitting in the majors to know.
I'd agree.
I think my first order of business is to sign a left-handed relief pitcher for $1 million who can throw strikes at a decent clip until Connor Prelip is ready for the Major League bullpen, in addition to Cody Funderburk, because
we're just gonna stick Prelip in the bullpen like he's not gonna be the best starter in the organization.
I am gonna stick Prelip in the bullpen. That's another fun conversation for another day.
They did it with Johan. Why wouldn't they do it with the next Cy Young winner that they have?
I think it's fair to without getting on too much of a tangent, I absolutely think it's fair to question, given that he's had 2 TJ surgeries, including the internal brace procedure, just how much life Prelip's arm has. And
that's fair.
If we're questioning that, I want to see some of that life at the major league level. Like if I compare him to a guy like Cantorino, who seems like the nicest dude in the universe, it is so sad to me that he has not had an opportunity to throw in the majors because of arm health, because I have absolutely no doubt that he would have occupied, at the very worst, a solid medium leverage reliever role for a good few years for the Twins.
Is there a chance that he pitches this year? What do we?
I think so. But I don't have up to date kind of rehab or health updates on Cantorino, so I'm sure we will find out more as we get closer to spring training. But my first order of business would be to sign a left-handed reliever, because forget about Prelip for a second. You don't want to go into spring with Cody Funderburk as your only lefty, in my opinion. And I'm assuming that Caleb Thielbar is not coming back.
So Thielbar, free agent.
I think that's done, right?
I don't know. I could see them giving him a minor league deal,
but he was bad last year, Jeremy.
He was bad 7 years ago, and then he quit baseball, and then he figured it out. Like, what you're gonna get is someone that's not great. It's gonna be someone that's not great, and that's why I don't know when it was who need a left-handed reliever, and I'm like, how about Aroldis Chapman? And people are like, no. I mean, for good reasons and other reasons.
Lots of good reasons.
And then he turned out that he still knew how to throw a baseball left-handed. So it's just so hard with finding the right dude, and the track record of the Twins and finding the right reliever has been god awful. So sign like 8 lefties to minor league deals and miss on all 8, and then just watch Cody Funderburk be Cody Funderburk.
Right on. Okay, so we're gonna obviously get much more into the offseason needs, the moves as the offseason rolls around. I do want to finish on some listener questions, and we'll just do some housekeeping to end up. I'm gonna do 2 out of these 3 questions because one of them I think is too vague. Jeremy, maybe you can read this first one and I can speak to it, because I feel like we're in early days, but maybe it's a Jamie question, given that we're in November, and not yet a Jeremy question.
Okay, I was gonna say the one you highlighted. Okay, so Cody E on Blue Sky asks or says, generally speaking, what are the strengths of the 2025 draft class?
Yeah, so we'll do a MLB draft lottery preview episode a week before. That's coming up on December 10th. Twins have like a 1% chance of moving up. Really early. You would be this would be the answer you'll get if you asked Jeremy this question. He would say, way too early to say. Let's talk about something else.
No, I'd say Ethan Holiday. He's strength.
And like that is true, right? It is too early. There's not been any 2025 baseball played yet, but there are a couple of things I think we can say about it. Number one is I think it is like in the same realm as 2024. I don't think it's that much better. I don't think it's going to be that much worse, but that's early for that kind of take. I think the prep class is going to be quite a bit better. So if you like high school players, you're in luck. And the college class might be a little bit worse. Don't want to comment on pitching yet, because that's usually the thing that changes the absolute most between guys, how guys are expected to do and how they actually do. Catching looks very thin to me. Just
Always
looking,
does.
always doesn't it? I actually liked the catching last year though, but catching looks thin, like 2023 thin when there was like 3 guys in the top 150. But a common kind of pearl of wisdom people will throw out about a draft class is you can judge the strength of the draft class based on the prep shortstop demographic, and that looks a lot better than last year, which, to be clear, is not like a very high bar because the prep shortstop demographic last year was horrible, but it's certainly better this year. So I think the headlines are prep a little bit better, college a little bit worse, overall strength roughly the same, and we'll know more as we get into the spring and beyond. Okay, here's a question for you, Jeremy. This is another Blue Sky question. See, Blue Sky is the truth for sourcing questions and opinions from folks in the baseball world now. So Twins Takes on Blue Sky asks, do you think Rosario, that's Kalai Rosario, has a chance to impact the big leagues next year? Unfortunately, I'm getting Brent Rooker vibes. Now, I don't know what unfortunately I'm getting Brent Rooker vibes means, because if I remember, he came up, hit a couple of home runs, and then broke his arm. Against the Cardinals,
and there was
my memory is serving correctly, and now is one of the better hitters in the league.
Right, just dead.
What do you think about? We've talked about Rosario a decent amount, but what's your view on whether he could contribute at the major league level next year?
Now with the Twins, and not good. Like he's like Severino was for me. Like he's not deserving of a 40-man spot. He'll play Major League Baseball at some point because he's been good enough, but I just don't see him as even a guy that spends much time. There's too much swing and miss. There's I think enough questions about his defense in that he's not a defender, and so the value's tied up in the bat, and there's just not enough value there. So if he goes somewhere else and has a great career, good for him. I don't get the feeling that he's going to be anything more than a quad A type player. But if he is, I don't see it for the Twins. I think the Twins will try to keep him around and get as many looks as possible, right? To just make sure they're not missing, and they're not. He's not the answer.
Yep. I kind of agree. I don't think I have anything to add to that. I think it's a great summary. Okay, great questions, y'all. Appreciate you sending them in on Blue Sky. We'll put out the call for more of those ahead of our next episode. Want to finish up with some housekeeping, and then we'll do a we'll throw out there a kind of consensus question for people to react to. So housekeeping stuff. Ways that you can support the pod. You can download us on your preferred podcast vehicle of choice. You can find us on Twitter at DTS_pod1. You can now find us on Blue Sky as well if you want to follow us over there. We usually tweet out all of our episodes. The YouTube handle is at Destination the Show, all one word. And if you want to send in questions via email, which we enjoy receiving emails too, that's destinationtheshow@gmail.com. Anything you can do to support the pod, we greatly appreciate that, whether that's as simple as sharing an episode, downloading an episode, sending in a question. We enjoy all the interactions. So thank you and keep them coming. Here's my crowdsourcing question of the week that I'm going to throw out there, and we'll share this after kind of Thanksgiving is over in preparation for our next episode. So we did kind of a high level of off-season needs for each team. What I want to hear from folks on is, what is a dream move for your team this offseason? And then what is a good realistic move that you think your team will make this offseason? So whether that's Cubs, Brewers, or Twins, what's a dream move? What's a realistic move? Whether that is a free agent signing, a minor league signing with an invitation to spring training, maybe in the case of the Twins, whether that is an aggressive trade. Who are you interested in your team pursuing this offseason? Don't have to include, trade return and all of that good stuff. Just what caliber and type of players do you want to see your team go after to get them ready for the 2025 season? You can share your responses on any of our social media stuff. Send us an email, and we'll put out that crowdsourcing question ahead of our next episode. Until then, Jeremy, enjoy your Thanksgiving. Do you have any fun plans?
No, my family lives not far away. My wife's family lives not far away, so
Right on.
we'll visit with both. How about you? Going anywhere fun? Oh
Going to
yeah,
Michigan.
yeah.
Driving to Michigan
Michigan.
on Thursday with my kids, my dog, my mother-in-law, who let me know that she has prepared a long list of car games for us to play on the 9-hour drive. So we might need to have a quick pre-drive huddle to make sure we're on the same page about how the car ride's going to go. It'll be it'll be interesting. It'll be good. Anyway, buddy, hope you have a good break, and look forward to getting back at it next week. And maybe we'll have some off-season news to talk about. Who knows?
I doubt it, but yeah, you have a wonderful Thanksgiving as well.
All right, we'll catch you guys later.